Arnold, and welcome to my channel, The Redshifting Web. In this video, I will discuss a subject that on the surface seems simple or obvious, yet is often overlooked or underrepresented. And that is the importance of religion. When the term religion is brought up, a variety of ideas, thoughts, and feelings may arise, and depending on one's personal experience, may hold positive or negative associations with it. Regardless of one's experience, religion is and will likely remain a pervasive force in the world. Indeed, it is visible throughout culture, both high culture and pop culture, politics, economics, education, and even language. To quote Darren Marina, religion is so finely interwoven into the fabric of human life and society to the degree that if you try to pull on any other string that constitutes human culture, the thread of religion will tighten up and provide resistance. As such, I think it is a subject that warrants both study and discourse, whether a person is religious or not. In this video, I will cover the following topics: defining religion, relevant examples of religion's influence, and the need for religious literacy for present and future generations. When it comes to defining religion, there is actually a lot of debate among scholars as to what constitutes a proper definition. Because of the diversity of religious beliefs, practices, and expressions across the human experience, it is difficult to distill the richness found among all religious traditions into a single applicable definition. A tall order, to put it mildly. Some argue that a universally applicable definition is not possible, while others point out that the term religion itself is a Western Christian concept that is erroneously applied to traditions from different cultures. Of course, if we are to discuss a particular subject, then we need to employ terminology to even discuss it. So, whether one likes it or not, the term and subject of religion remains. While there are a plethora of definitions, many of which have fallen out of use over time, for the purposes of this video, I have selected 4 definitions that fall on the side of these two categories: monothetic and polythetic. A monothetic definition is defined by a single characteristic and can be substantive, which is to identify the core of religion with a focus on a specific object, such as God, God's powerful beings, etc., or it is functional, and that religion is described in terms of what it does for human beings, such as social connectivity, assuages fear of death, or provides meaning and purpose. A polythetic definition, in contrast, constructs a list of characteristics that describe what religion is about, generally, and demonstrates an overlap and resemblance among characteristics to suggest a consistent and continuous reality behind the term religion, even if it cannot be confined to a single, absolute, essential quality. The first two that I am including here can be found among some of the classic definitions or understandings of religion. These two definitions qualify as monothetic as they point to a single characteristic or essence found within religious traditions. Beginning with Emil Durkheim, he states that all known religious beliefs, whether simple or complex, present one common characteristic. They presuppose a classification of all things, real and ideal, of which men think, into two classes or opposed groups, generally designated by two distinct terms which are translated well enough by the words profane and sacred. A foundational concept when discussing religion, and perhaps you've heard the terms sacred and profane before, Durkheim takes note that there is a distinction made between the religious and non-religious spheres. That is, for religious practitioners, what is relegated to the sphere of religion holds a particular quality and significance that is not found within the ordinary, day-to-day, or mundane spheres of life. In contrast, we have William James's definition, where he states religion, therefore, as I now ask you arbitrarily to take it, shall mean for us the feelings, acts, and experiences of individual men in their solitude, so far as they apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider the divine. James's stipulative definition focuses on the personal experience of the religious practitioner and, rather than relying on specific designation of what is divine, relegates that conception to the realm of the individual. While each of these definitions is useful in certain respects, these definitions are also limited to a particular lens or scope of religion and are not necessarily applicable to all religious traditions. Jumping ahead in time a bit is Ninian Smart's 7 Dimensions of Religion. Here's an example of a polythetic definition whereby Smart sought to highlight key parts that comprise a religion in an attempt to be more universally applicable. The dimensions themselves are fluid, as certain elements of religion can fall under more than one dimension. I will provide a brief explanation of each dimension. The first is the narrative dimension. The function of narratives in religion is to engage with the practitioner's imagination, provide a wider definition of what is true, and provide a deeper meaning to the human condition. They are foundational for ritual, doctrine, beliefs, and practices. Second, we have the ritual dimension, which is the performative actions within a religion or how beliefs are expressed through action. Next is the dimension of doctrine. In essence, doctrines are the teachings of religion that may concern ethics, express spiritual ideas, include ideas about creation and reality, divinity and humanity, salvation, as well as other beliefs that are found within a religion. The dimension of ethics consists of the rules or regulations about how human beings should conduct themselves in their daily lives. These rules often serve to advise humans through prescriptions, or the do's, and the proscriptions, or don'ts, of the ethical dimension. Next is the social organization dimension, the organizational structure that helps implement the doctrines, ethics, and rituals practiced within a religious community. This religious community is typically broken up between religious specialists, who are trained in religious knowledge and hold positions of authority, and the laity, or the members of the religious community. The experiential dimension is usually thought of as being separate or distinct from daily or ordinary experience, but can be a part of one's daily life. The cultural framework built by narratives, doctrines, and social organizations provide ideas of what constitutes a religious experience. The final dimension is that of material culture. In this dimension, material objects serve as avenues of expression for the other dimensions, and can include ritual implements, buildings, architecture, art, books, manuscripts, clothing, and symbols. To recap, SMART's polythetic dimension is meant to be utilized as a lens to determine what elements constitute a religion, with none of the dimensions existing in a vacuum, just as religion is experienced as a whole rather than in parts. The final definition that I will include here is presented by Bruce Lincoln in his book Holy Terrors, written in the aftermath of the events of 9/11 to address the role of religion at the turn of the century. He states that religion is a discourse whose concerns transcend the human, temporal, and contingent, and that claims for itself a similarly transcendent status. It is a set of practices whose goal is to produce a proper world and/or proper human subjects, as defined by a religious discourse to which these practices are connected. It is a community whose members construct their identity with reference to a religious discourse and its attendant practices. And it is an institution that regulates religious discourse, practices, and community, reproducing them over time and modifying them as necessary, while asserting their eternal validity and transcendent value. Lincoln breaks his definition of religion into four constituents that are broad in their scope while also calling attention to specific elements. Take note that there are some echoes of the previously covered definitions within Lincoln's own definition. While merely introductory, I hope these definitions illustrate the complexity and nuance of the subject and are useful lenses when thinking about religion. If your interest has been piqued, I recommend these two books that go through the definitions writings from scholars that have contributed to the field of religious studies. That is Bradley L. Hurling's A Beginner's Guide to the Study of Religion and Daniel L. Powell's Introducing Religion. Now with these definitions in mind, let's take a look at why religion matters through examples, beginning with statistics from the Pew Research Center's study, How the Global Religious Landscape Changed from 2010 to 2020. According to these statistics, between Christians, Muslims, and Hindus alone, there are over 5 billion religious practitioners. That is more than half the total world population. These numbers suggest the likelihood of interacting with someone on a daily basis who adheres to a religious tradition or whose worldview, at least, is influenced by religious beliefs. By worldview here, I mean a commitment, a fundamental orientation of the heart that can be expressed as a story or in a set of presuppositions, which are assumptions which may be true, partially true, or entirely false, that we hold consciously or subconsciously, consistently or inconsistently, about the basic constitution of reality, and that provides the foundation on which we live and move and have our being. This is to say that the majority of individuals in the world, their actions and contributions to their respective social circles, communities, and societies are in some way grounded in religious belief. To quote Samuel P. Huntington, in society after society, religion manifests itself in the daily lives and work of people and the concerns and projects of governments. In other words, religion undergirds the drive behind decision-making of individuals from all social strata within a given society. Considering the numbers again, the significance of religious influence becomes more apparent. Now hold on, you may say. What about the 1.9 billion religiously unaffiliated? That's a rather large percentage of the world population, and it can be seen that the amount of religiously unaffiliated has increased according to this study. This is a fair counter, so allow me to take a brief detour to explore this particular group. The Pew Research Center categorizes the religiously unaffiliated, also known as religious nones, as those who do not identify themselves with any religion, are atheist or agnostic. This category also consists of those who were raised within a religious tradition, but no longer identify with it in adulthood. The Pew Research Center also notes that religious nones make up the majority of the populations of 10 countries, which is up from seven a decade ago. However, they also stated the following, that the religiously unaffiliated aren't necessarily devoid of religious beliefs and practices. Research indicates that many people who don't belong to a religious group may still hold religious or spiritual beliefs and participate in religious or spiritual activities. Their first example comes from their 2023 to 2024 U.S. Religious Landscape Study, in which they found that 54% of religiously unaffiliated adults believe in God or universal spirit, while 69% believe that humans have a soul or spirit. Their second example comes from an analysis of Chinese academic surveys fielded between 2016 and 2018, where they found that 21% of religiously unaffiliated adults burn incense to worship deities at least a few times a year, and the same percentage stated that they visited a site to pray for good luck at least once in the prior year. Now, in China, only 10% of people have a religious identity. Part of the discrepancy noted in China is that religious practices are not necessarily tied to a religious institution, which is what we in the West would consider religious affiliation. Japan is also a similar case, where people visit shrines or participate in matsuri, which is Shinto festivals, but are not tied or affiliated with a specific religious institution. However, Pew Research Center also states that in China and the United States, as well as other countries, religiously unaffiliated adults typically engage in religious and spiritual practices at lower rates than religiously affiliated people do. All this is to say that while religious nones may be less religiously inclined, they are not altogether irreligious. The other factor that is not covered by the Pew Research Center, but I think should be taken into consideration, are new religious movements, or NRMs for short. Due to the diversity found among NRMs, scholars have opted to describe their major characteristics rather than provide a strict definition. New religious movements are considered religious traditions that have been formed from around 1700 to the present. These are sometimes colloquially referred to as cults. NRMs implement new rationales for being religious, introduce new beliefs and practices, and sometimes reformulate the purposes of old ones. These can be reformations of previously established religions, amalgamations of various traditions, or consist of new ideas not drawn from existing traditions. There's a tendency to place emphasis on the role of lay people in managing their own spiritual advancement, with a de-emphasis on the authority of clerical roles. Finally, they make greater use of more secular forms of management, administration, and assembly, and of modern means of communication. Because NRMs can be new iterations of existing religious traditions, or wholly new creations that lay outside the institutional realms of religion, it is difficult to account for the number of practitioners that adhere to them. Furthermore, not all new religious movements that operate in the world are necessarily recognized or accounted for. In short, we need to take care not to overstate the number of religiously unaffiliated, as there are a number of factors that complicate it as a category. With the statistical landscape parsed out, let's take a look at some contemporary examples of the role religion plays in the world. The first topic should not come as a surprise, either as a person who adheres to a religious tradition or not, and that is the role of religion in conflicts. Religion-related conflicts can vary in size and intensity, including religious persecution and social hostilities between religious groups within a given country or region, acts of terrorism, border skirmishes between countries, to full-scale wars between civilizations. As this is an introductory video, I will only provide a few examples of current or recent conflicts that have a religious component to them. First example is the war between Russia and Ukraine, and, perhaps surprising, the religious component of the conflict. At the start of the war, the Russian Orthodox Church called for the preservation of Russian land, including Ukraine and Belarus. In contrast, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church of Ukraine appealed for resistance against Russia. The development of these institutions and the history of their relationship go back centuries. But for the purposes of this video, the focus will be from the 20th century onward. If we go back to the collapse of the Russian Empire in 1917, there was a call among Ukrainian Orthodox churches to claim autonomy from the Russian Orthodox Church. However, by the 1930s, due to Soviet anti-religious policies, the structure of the churches was crippled, with many religious leaders being arrested and parishes closed. During World War II, the Soviet authorities, in a bid to rally the population in areas under Nazi occupation, both in Ukraine and Belarus, granted the Russian Orthodox Church some legal existence under close administrative control. The Soviet state then utilized the church to reintegrate parts of Ukraine reconquered from the Nazis, and this action included forcibly reuniting the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church under the Russian Orthodox Church. Fast forward to the late 1980s when Mikhail Gorbachev loosened religious restrictions, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church and Ukrainian Autocephalous Orthodox Church re-emerged and claimed over one-third of the parishes of the Russian Orthodox Church within the Ukrainian Republic. Soon thereafter, there were three competing Orthodox churches within Ukraine. Over time, a widespread sense that a united autocephalous Orthodox Church was needed within an independent Ukraine. This feeling intensified after Russia's seizure of Crimea and its war in the Donbass region in 2014. In 2019, this reality came to fruition when the ecumenical patriarch, who is the head of the Orthodox Church, recognized the autocephaly of a new Orthodox Church of Ukraine, which is comprised of the three formerly competing Orthodox churches. The significance of the independence of the Ukrainian Church from the Russian Orthodox Church extends beyond the confines of four church walls. It is an example of where religion intersects with history, ethnicity, and geopolitics that are a formative part of Ukrainian identity, thus contributing to the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Next example is the intermittent conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Central to the conflict between the two nations is the Nagorno-Karabakh enclave, with its own complex history and ethno-geographic relations. Again, religion is also a notable component of the conflict and the ongoing tensions between Armenia and its neighbors. Armenia is considered to be the first nation to establish Orthodox Christianity as a state religion, which was established in 301 CE. Armenia's neighbors, Turkey to the west, Azerbaijan to the east, and Iran to the south, are Islamic in contrast. Historically, Armenians had been routinely persecuted while under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, and, during World War I, a genocide and forcible deportation was committed against the Armenian peoples by the Ottoman authorities. These events came to shape part of the modern Armenian identity. When conflict has flared up between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the latter has received support politically, financially, and militarily by Turkey. Because of this support, historically based fears reignite and the ethno-religious identity of the Armenians is reinforced. Once again, this demonstrates how religion plays a role in the formation of the identity and the larger implications that has beyond the confines of the individual. The third example of conflict is that between India and Pakistan. Like in the previous examples, there has been a long-standing tension and conflict over a region where both ethnicity and religion come into play. In this case, it is the territory of Kashmir, which is predominantly controlled by India but contains a majority Muslim population. Islamization in Pakistan and Hindu nationalism in India have fueled religious tensions among the region and its population. Religious persecution of religious minorities is rampant on both sides of the divide, furthering the tensions. The most recent conflict occurred in the spring of 2025, after 26 Indian tourists were killed in Kashmir, prompting India to launch missile strikes in early May. Pakistan responded in kind. However, a ceasefire was brokered not long after. Yet, tensions remain within the region. Each of these conflicts are examples of how religious identity intertwines with ethnicity, geography, and geopolitics. These factors can lead to the formation of an us-them dichotomy that can easily conflagrate into conflict. Turning to a more positive subject is the relationship between religion and humanitarian aid. For this example, I will only focus on two organizations, though it should be understood that religious organizations from the world's various traditions contribute to humanitarian endeavors in numerous ways. These two organizations are Samaritan's Purse and Tzu Chi. Samaritan's Purse is a Christian organization founded in the United States in 1970, and Tzu Chi is a Buddhist organization founded in Taiwan in 1968. Both organizations have a strong international presence and have contributed to multiple fields of humanitarian aid. International relief encompasses aid during crises, including those from natural disasters, famine, conflict, and health epidemics. This encompasses physical materials such as food, water, and clothing to the construction and reconstruction of buildings. Medicine entails healthcare professionals providing medical care for simple ailments to more serious conditions, as well as provision of medical equipment and supplies. Both organizations also provide comprehensive education to children and adults to provide them with the knowledge and skills to improve community conditions and employment opportunities. This includes standard education curriculums, as well as practical knowledge covering topics such as sanitation, hygiene, and agricultural practices. Finally, community volunteerism provides avenues for religious and non-religious persons to help those in need. For religious practitioners, this means putting their beliefs into action, thereby demonstrating that their respective beliefs are not just empty platitudes, but a way of being in the world. Additionally, it demonstrates the relationship between the individual and institutionalized religion on the one hand, and how institutional religion interacts with communities outside of its own local circles on the other. Another pervasive conversation concerning religion is that of its role in caring for the environment. The world's religious traditions have various views, interpretations, and relationships with the environment. Furthermore, this is a conversation in which religious views about the environment are ongoing and changing, making it a complicated subject to navigate. For this reason, I will only focus on two organizations that seek to build positive connections between religion and the environment. They are Green Faith and the Wild Church Network. Green Faith, which was founded in 1992, is a global multi-faith grassroots community that promotes eco-justice through outreach events, contextualized eco-theology education, and organizing/campaigning skills training. It encourages activism by religious adherents to promote environmental friendly policies and education of the public within their respective regions. Furthermore, it encourages interreligious and intercultural dialogue for the benefit of humankind through stewardship of the environment. The second organization, the Wild Church Network, was founded in 2016. It is a grassroots movement whose intentions are to, quote, resacralize our wild and alive earth by moving beyond human-made walls and dogmas, and to untame religion beyond institutions, as the us-them boundaries of religious identity are less important than the common roots of our shared belonging with the sacred earth. Additionally, it considers itself as being beyond the stewardship model of caretaking, while churches practice the spirituality of relationship and kinship with our more than human neighbors. It also encourages interreligious and intercultural dialogue with an emphasis on the importance of the earth as part of one's spiritual practice. The Wild Church Network has over 200 affiliated churches, primarily located in the United States, Canada, and parts of Europe, but it's not only those locations. While Green Faith operates more so in the public sphere in order to educate and influence governmental policies, the Wild Church Network focuses on transforming the individual and the community's relationship with the environment through spiritual practice. Each also demonstrates how the role of religion is not only impactful through large religious institutions, but through grassroots movements as well. All right, let us summarize what we've covered so far. Religion, which is difficult to define in exact terms but has discernible characteristics, is a driving force behind the decisions of individuals to communities to nations. It is a strong component of identity, and that most of the world population identifies with a religious tradition or holds some form of religious belief and participates in practices that can be considered religious in nature. Furthermore, we've seen that religion plays a role in conflicts, intercultural relations, and humanitarian aid, and plays an ongoing role between humankind and the environment. So this raises the question, okay, so religion is important. What's that got to do with me? This brings us to our final topic, that of the need for religious literacy. In his book, Religious Literacy, published in 2007, Stephen Prothero outlined his arguments for the need of religious literacy specifically among American citizens. I contend, however, that the importance of religious literacy is vital regardless of nationality. These two quotes briefly summarize the crux of his argument. First, when it comes to religion, we have had good reasons for our collective amnesia. More often than not, it was tolerance that drove us to jettison theology for morality, to trade in the doctrines and stories of our religious traditions for the promise of social order. There are doubtless many today who are delighted to have the not-so-golden age of bitter sectarian disputes about infant baptism behind us. We're convinced nothing good can come of learning about how theologians calculate the number of angels dancing on the head of a pin. But the costs of perpetuating religious ignorance are too high in a world in which faith moves, if not mountains, then at least elections and armies. Secondly, he states, in today's world, it is irresponsible to use the word educated to describe high school or college graduates who are ignorant of the ancient stories that continue to motivate the beliefs and behaviors of the overwhelming majority of the world's population. In a world as robustly religious as ours, it is foolish to imagine that such graduates are equipped to participate fully in the politics of the nation or the affairs of the world. Prothero considers religious literacy not only as a crucial criterion for a complete education, but also as a civic duty. Hopefully, through the materials presented in these slides, I have contributed to the affirmation of Prothero's argument. Next, we will look at the definition of religious literacy and what you can do to improve it. Prothero states that religious literacy refers to the ability to understand and use in one's day-to-day life the basic building blocks of religious traditions, their key terms, symbols, doctrines, practices, sayings, characters, metaphors, and narratives. He also goes on to say that one cannot be literate in every religion. Neither is there one generic religion to speak. It would probably be most precise, therefore, to refer to specific religious literacies. For example, Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam are all umbrella terms for religious traditions, yet there are various branches within each tradition, which can be broken down even further to specific denominations and sects. Considering how rich religious traditions can be, it would be impossible to become literate in every single tradition and its minutiae, as Prothero indicates. Instead, the goal is as such. Like other forms of literacy, religious literacy is more a fluid practice than a fixed condition. It is the ability to participate in our ongoing conversation about the private and public powers of religions. Essentially, one is not required to be an expert on any given religion, but at the very least have a working understanding of religious traditions. In this manner, Prothero lays out the basic requirements of what religious literacy entails. However, literacy in any subject or language is not just about retaining basic information. Eugene V. Gallagher, in response to Prothero's book, lays out the following regarding religious literacy. Religious literacy must involve not only a degree of mastery of basic information, but also some insight into how people use that basic information to orient themselves in the world, express their individual and communal self-understanding, and give their lives direction and meaning. To be literate about religion, one needs to know something about religious dynamics, mechanics, and processes, the how of religion. A clear understanding of both the what and the how is necessary to grasping the why of religion, why human beings have persisted in this mode of behavior, even as it has imposed extraordinary demands on them and has frequently brought them tears as to joy. As Gallagher points out, religious literacy requires some level of intimate understanding in order to rightly comprehend the persistence of religion and its relation to the world we live in. So, what can one do to make oneself religiously literate? Listed here are a few recommendations of how to equip oneself with a better understanding of religious traditions. The first is taking an introductory course through an institution, whether secular or religious. The benefit of this is that these courses are structured with specific goals in mind as to the knowledge that they are trying to impart. The rest can be regarded as a form of self-study, such as reading a text from a religious tradition with optional additional commentary, reading articles about religious traditions and their relation to specific topics, watching an informative video on a religious tradition, talking with someone from a religious tradition about their beliefs. And this could be a religious authority or a layperson. Or, if the option is present, attending a religious service. When it comes to self-study, it may be helpful to come up with a list of questions or topics when approaching a religious tradition that you would like to have answered or better understand. That is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you found it informative in some way, please consider leaving a comment or liking and subscribing. Thank you, and I hope to see you again.